So, if you saw my last video, I discussed why I got into the marriage business, and I also discussed some of the laws of being a wedding officiant in Virginia. Now, I moved back to New York in 2011, and when I first moved to New York, I had a really hard time in the wedding business. I had a very hard time booking anything. I think I went maybe for a year without doing any weddings. I did one wedding. I remember someone from New Jersey called me and asked if they could come to Virginia to get married, and I told them, well, I'm in New York, and the reason they wanted to come to Virginia was, as I discussed in the last video, Virginia has no waiting period for weddings. New Jersey has a 72-hour waiting period. New York has a 24-hour waiting period. So, and they had a reason, a health reason, that they wanted to avoid the waiting periods. I think the groom unfortunately, he had to undergo a surgery, and they wanted to be married before he went into surgery. And so, therefore, they said, well, 24 hours is better than 72 hours, and they wound up meeting me in New York, and they got married in Loch Sheldrake, right on the lake. So that's part of my experience. Now, I discovered that one of the best places for my particular business to perform weddings is Pennsylvania, and part of the reason for that is because the laws in Pennsylvania as to who can perform a wedding are very complicated. As far as the actual ceremony and filling out the paperwork is quite easy compared to a lot of other locations, a lot of other states and so forth. It's one of the easiest, kind of similar to Virginia, but even in a way easier than Virginia. Another difference, though, Virginia, like we said, you have to register with the state to perform marriage legally in Virginia, to sign the marriage license as a minister, as an officiant. And Pennsylvania does not have that. However, there are a lot of legal gray areas, I think partially because there is no registration in Pennsylvania. Perhaps some of these legal gray areas could be alleviated by having officiants, including clergy and other officiants, register with the state, because the laws are so complicated as to who can perform a wedding. But the thing is that it also depends on a lot of variables, which make it, under the current laws, rather difficult to say that that officiants should register under the current laws. So I'm happy with the laws how they are personally, and even perhaps registration is not really necessary either. Very few states require registration. And there's one municipality we'll discuss another time, New York City, which, even though the rest of the state does not require, New York City does. If you perform a wedding within the 5 boroughs, even I would add if the marriage license was obtained somewhere else in New York. But that's for a different video. Now, Pennsylvania, I kind of like it because it helps me in my business as well, how complicated the laws are, and especially if you're legal there. Now, they'll often give to couples a letter when they receive their marriage license explaining how complicated the laws are, and also how it's their responsibility to make sure whoever they hired to perform the wedding, or sometimes you're not necessarily hiring someone, you might have a friend or a relative who will do it for you for free. But again, that whoever is officiating should be legal in Pennsylvania. Now, Pennsylvania, if we go into the history of Pennsylvania, was founded, of course, as the name implies, by William Penn. And William Penn came to this area of Pennsylvania seeking religious freedom. He was a member of the Society of Friends, otherwise known as the Quaker Church. And Mr. Penn founded the state of Pennsylvania, the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, the colony at the time, the colony of Pennsylvania, which later became the state, which we know as the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania, with Quakerism at heart. However, being that Quakers believe in tolerance as part of in being very tolerant and practicing tolerance as part of their faith, it was not made the official faith of the colony nor of the state, consequently. Noted some of the early states did have official religions. A lot of folks don't know that, and that's a different discussion on how the Establishment Clause has been applied to the states. I feel it was a stretch that the progressive movement has imposed upon the states, really unconstitutionally, through legislation, through the courts, which courts don't, the judiciary is not supposed to be a legislature. It's supposed to be two separate things, but I digress. However, Quakerism is something that you will find has an effect on the laws of getting married in Pennsylvania, in as much that Pennsylvania is one of two states, the other one being Colorado, that gives you two choices as to what kind of marriage license you want to receive. That's considered a marriage license, and that's different than certain states which offer domestic partnerships that are not marriages, which are not as much in vogue, but still available now that, again, the Supreme Court legislated something that really should have been none of their business. But again, I'm digressing. Now, it should have been left to the states to decide. Really, states matter. But again, I'm digressing. Pennsylvania, like I said, does offer two types of marriage licenses. One is the standard license, which unless you ask specifically, that's what you're going to get when you go to get your license in Pennsylvania to get married. The other one is often called the Quaker license, and it's, although it would also fit for the Amish as well, which also have a large following in Pennsylvania. And it was a matter of dispute as to whether only Quakers were allowed to receive such a license, or others of similar religions. The Quaker religion, for those who don't know, does not have any clergy. So a Quaker marriage, for example, instead of being officiated by a pastor, by a minister, because there are no Quaker ministers, there are no Quaker pastors, would rather be witnessed by all of those who are present at the wedding. And part of the Quaker ceremony is that everyone who is present at the ceremony will sign a document attesting that they are witnesses, as opposed to, many, not all states, but many states, when you have a marriage license, you will require one or two witnesses to sign as witnesses. Pennsylvania, incidentally, and Virginia as well, are not one of those. However, if you get this Quaker license, otherwise known as a self-uniting license, you do need witnesses. If you're married in Pennsylvania by an officiant, whether it be a civil officiant such as a judge, magistrate, a mayor, things like that. A lot of people will ask if a notary public can officiate a wedding. They cannot in Pennsylvania. I think one of the only states that I can think of that a notary public can officiate in weddings is Florida, but I could be wrong about that. But I know that is one of the states that allows notaries to officiate at weddings. But most states do not, and Pennsylvania does not, or a member of the clergy. So if you get a self-uniting license, the question was presented to courts in Pennsylvania, could you get a self-uniting license if you're not a Quaker or Amish or a member of one of these other churches that do not have clergy? And because some of there was an atheist couple, they wanted to get married in Pennsylvania with a self-uniting license, They didn't want to have to go hire a minister to officiate, and they didn't want to have to go hire a judge to officiate, for that matter, because you have to pay the judge also. They just want to get a self-uniting license. And the clerk in a particular municipality did not want to give it to them because they said, no, you're not Quakers. And in the end, that went to the courts in Pennsylvania, and it was found that no, any couple can request a self-uniting license. But again, you have to request it, and most people don't know that. My experience in Pennsylvania is, a lot of folks, they'll get their marriage license, they didn't even know that was an option. Now, if you have that self-uniting license, then you can have anybody officiate your wedding, because legally they're not signing as an officiant, but they're signing as a witness, and they can put on whatever kind of show they want while doing it, and essentially serve as an officiant. So if in Pennsylvania you want to have a friend officiate, or you want to hire someone who is ordained online and does not work at a church and is not a member of your particular religion, I would strongly suggest to get a self-uniting license, because then it doesn't matter who officiates, and the officiant is serving more as a witness and not as an officiant according to the laws of the Commonwealth of Pennsylvania. You will need at least one other witness, though, because I'm pretty sure, I've never dealt with self-uniting licenses in Pennsylvania, but you will need, I'm pretty sure the requirement is to have 2 witnesses for the self-uniting. Now, most people don't get the self-uniting license. They don't know about it. You already got your license. What do you do? Who do you get to perform your wedding? Can you just have, as in many other states, have someone go and get ordained online at the Universal Life Church, and they can perform your marriage? And there are many officiants who, that's where their credentials are from. They just sign their name online, and that's the credentials. And again, in most states in America, that's totally fine. Pennsylvania is not so simple. Now, the thing with that, as far as Pennsylvania is concerned, it shouldn't be misunderstood, because a lot of folks will say there was a Supreme Court case about the Universal Life Church that said that they are totally legally allowed to perform marriages, to ordain ministers who can perform weddings. And that was in the 70s. It was a Supreme Court case. So how is it that what some folks who are ordained by the Universal Life Church will say that Pennsylvania is denying their religious freedom by not recognizing marriages done by ministers of the Universal Life Church? And that is not true. It is like this, rather. Pennsylvania requires clergy to meet one of 2. Now, if you're a judge or a mayor or something, that's a different story. But clergy, they have to meet one of 2. There are one of 2 ways that clergy can officiate a wedding. If one of the partners in the wedding, the bride or the groom, or however it is at the wedding, for that particular religion, then and the marriage is done in accordance with the laws of that religion, then anyone can officiate at such a wedding. For example, technically, Judaism does not require, for example, an ordained rabbi to officiate at a wedding. They just require someone who is familiar with the laws of marriage to officiate, and there to be 2 valid witnesses. Technically, a groom, if he knows the laws well enough, could officiate at his own wedding. I know one rabbi who I know did so, although that's kind of frowned on. Same thing as in Islam. You have 2 witnesses, and any Muslim person again, any Jewish person can, generally understood in Orthodoxy to be a Jewish man, although that's not necessarily so as long as the witnesses are male, from Me'ikar Adin, can officiate a wedding. And the same thing in Islam. I think one Muslim man and then another person. The second witness could be either Muslim or person of the book. I'm not sure. For in Islam, couldn't officiate. One time I was asked to officiate at a wedding for a Muslim couple, as a civil officiant, basically, and technically, and I was happy to do so. Did so. I didn't take part in the religious ceremony. I only performed a civil ceremony, but technically, they could have. I think that what they said was part of the ceremony they did there already, and then the other part was being with the imam later in Jersey, but he wouldn't come to Virginia. He wouldn't come to Pennsylvania to perform the marriage. They were going to Jersey to do it, but then they said a friend of theirs did part of the religious ceremony. Technically, he could have signed, but I was hired to do so. I didn't ask for a lot of money. It was actually quite a small amount of money, just basically my travel, and but technically he could have. I really wasn't aware that they were doing the religious ceremony, and otherwise I would have let them know that, so they didn't have to spend the money. But again, it wasn't that much. They traveled to me, and it was a whole thing. We met halfway. Because of course I live in New York. But technically he could have signed. Now, again, what if you want to have your friend get ordained in the Universal Life Church? If the bride or the groom considers themselves a member of the Universal Life Church, then a minister from the Universal Life Church can officiate at the wedding. Or if the minister who is ordained by the Universal Life Church pastors a church, he has a congregation, even if it meets in his house every week or in a storefront, he has some kind of congregation. Also, that's the second way. So the first way that you can perform a wedding in Pennsylvania is if even if you don't have a regularly established congregation, if one of the bride or the groom is a member of your religion and it's done in accordance to the laws of that religion, they can sign. So a Jewish wedding, even if someone who's not an ordained rabbi officiates at a Jewish wedding according to Jewish law, and a rabbi who doesn't have a congregation can perform a Jewish wedding in Pennsylvania and sign the marriage license. However, in my case, I'm a Jewish rabbi, and I perform weddings, non-denominational weddings, for people of the other religions, as well as Jewish weddings. So a rabbi who does not have a congregation cannot do so. I'm the assistant rabbi at my synagogue. I checked with clerks in Pennsylvania and several different municipalities. They said it's enough. An associate pastor can officiate. An assistant rabbi, whatever, can officiate. A deacon, someone. The main thing is then, if you're doing a wedding that's for someone who's not of your religion, both of them are not of your religion, then you have to have a job preaching, is what it seems. One letter that I saw says you have to preach regularly at a congregation that's regularly established congregation that meets in the house of worship. Even though the law doesn't specify that, that's probably you're going to be on the safe side, because a lot of times folks will not they won't be aware of that, and they then when they go to get divorced, the lawyer might find out, well, you weren't really married to begin with. It doesn't really matter until that point. You're filing for taxes or whatever, when you want to file jointly and stuff like that, that you're never going to have a problem. The only problem will come is if the couple gets divorced. Sometimes the judge will nullify the marriage based on who officiated. I remember one time I made a big boo-boo. I got caught in traffic and I was running late for a wedding, and they said, well, the manager of the hall did it. I was misinformed with a lot of things with the wedding. They were way underpaying me for how much I was traveling, and I thought of just meeting them at their house or something, and it turns out it's at this fancy wedding hall. So I guess they couldn't pay the rabbi. They had to. It was less than. It didn't even cover my travel expense. I thought I was doing some big mitzvah, and then I get in trouble for it. But anyway, most likely that couple is not legally married because they got married by the. Even if this guy was, from Universal Life Church, he was ordained. That doesn't mean anything in Pennsylvania, unless he actually works at a church or bride of the groom member of Universal Life Church, or whatever it is. So these type of things you should know when dealing with Pennsylvania. If you're just officiating for a friend, the friend and you want to get ordained online, and one of the bride or the groom wants to say they're a member of that Universal Life Church or whatever it is, then it's fine. To make a business out of it, and you're working with and you're ordained by Universal Life Church, and you do not serve a congregation, I can't think of any. It's really dishonest and it's wrong, unless you want to tell if you do want to work in Pennsylvania, and that's how you operate, and you were ordained by Universal Life Church. I would, even though I've heard that they say if you join a certain club, like an interfaith club, that's not a congregation, so I would be uncomfortable with that, especially since it's such a gray area legally. I would say if you're ordained by Universal Life Church, and you want to do weddings in Pennsylvania, you got to tell your couples to get a self-uniting license, which is also fine. Otherwise, I would I would suggest, if you're ordained by Universal, open your own church. Open in your house once a week. Invite, put up flyers. Say everyone's welcome for services once a week in my home, and be there every week at that time. Maybe one or two people show up. Incorporate as a church, as a congregation, legally, which is also good for your taxes and whatever, and do something like that. And then you can officiate at any wedding in Pennsylvania, because the main thing is not really where you were ordained as much as that you have the congregation, because you could have the congregation without being ordained and also be legal in Pennsylvania. Technically, it would seem. The main thing is having, although the best is to have both, and really to do non-denominational weddings in Pennsylvania, unless you're a judge or a mayor or something, it should really only be kept to people who actually work at a congregation. The congregation does not have to be in Pennsylvania. There's no residency requirement for the clergy, but there is that congregation requirement. Now, that's not recorded anywhere. You don't write it on the marriage license. Could you get away with it? Yes, but there is certainly a level of, dishonesty there, I would say, or ignorance of the law. And really, you have to follow the laws, especially you're signing a legal document. You should be legal in Pennsylvania. You shouldn't say, well, I got ordained in the Universal Life Church, and that's going to, no, so really to do weddings in Pennsylvania, it should really just be for real clergy who actually work, and even a retired clergy person who is no longer affiliated with their church, unless they have emeritus status or something like that, or even someone who's only a chaplain but doesn't have the congregation that they work for. Also, it's an issue unless they're doing for their own religion. For their own religion, according to the laws of their religion, that is good. But for non-denominational ceremonies that are not in accordance with the laws of any particular religion, that's very difficult to say. And so, therefore, again, if you want to do weddings in Pennsylvania as an officiant, either make sure that you work for a congregation, start your own, or get hired by a congregation in some capacity. I would say even in a volunteer capacity, but as long as because the congregation isn't going to just accept anybody. So even volunteering, someone has to accept you as a volunteer. So that should be also good enough. that, they'll say you're a deacon or an associate pastor or whatever it is. Most churches won't just take anybody, So there is a legitimacy to that when you do that. Because especially maybe that's the church you belong to or something like that. Or otherwise, you really can't officiate except if they get that self-uniting license or if they are members of your particular denomination. So, yeah, that's the laws in Pennsylvania. They're very complicated. But then filling out the marriage license, very easy. There's the regular marriage license, not self-uniting. There's no witnesses required. And all you have to do is put your name, address, title, and the city and county, the municipality and county in which the wedding took place. You don't have to put the exact address where the wedding took place, but you do have to put the name of the municipality and the name of the county. Sometimes you'll have to look that up. Wikipedia is a great resource for that. And then they usually give you a envelope, send it right back, and you're done. So it's very easy. After you do the ceremony, I'm going to make another video about how to do the ceremony, which really that's not a legal issue. That's more of I would say, an artistic issue in a way, or suggested issues. There are many different ways to perform ceremonies. If it's a Jewish ceremony, there's a whole different thing, but civil ceremonies, non-denominational ceremonies, tips on how to do it, how to get the leads and stuff. These are all complicated things that we want to discuss. So thank you. Please like, share, and subscribe, and have a good day.